Hello and welcome to the 2014 U.S. Chess Championships and U.S. Women's here in the capital of chess in America, St. Louis. We're in the beautiful Central West End, right across the street from the World Chess Hall of Fame. And for the 6th year running, we've been hosting the U.S. Chess Championship and the U.S. Women's at the St. Louis Chess Club. Some big matchups today.
Mouth-watering.
That's right, as we enter round 6 of the U.S. Championship and round 5 of the U.S. Women's. So players are shaking hands, wearing their snazzy St. Louis Chess Club vests. And wait a second, a swan. Where's the bow?
Just a second, we need a close-up to make sure.
No bow today? I don't know how I feel about that. I'm Jennifer Shahade, and I'm your host today at the U.S. Championship in U.S. Women's. I'm with Grandmaster Yasser Seirawan and Maurice Ashley. And let's take a look at the standings. Well, Alexander Lenderman leads our tournament. The New Yorker is impressing everyone. He's a point ahead of the pack. But what a pack it is. Just a point behind him, the Olympic team. Kamsky, Onishuk, Akobian, Garayev. The only one we're missing is, of course, Hikaru Nakamura.
Definitely.
Our leader on the U.S. Women's Championship, Irina Krush, playing some fantastic chess. And she's a half a point ahead of the field. Her main rival, Anna Zajansky, yesterday looked like she might lose, but in the end she held a draw with the Fortress, and so she's right behind Irina Krush. And Grandmaster Maurice Ashley has some stuff for us on the key matchups of the day.
Indeed, we are in the middle of these championships and the players are jockeying for position, getting ready for the stretch run. On the women's side, we have the big matchup, of course, between Tatev Abrahamyan and our leader, Irina Krush. Tatev, in previous years, a few years ago, was a runner-up in these events. She has never broken through to the top, so she is looking to see what she could do against our 5-time champion today. On the men's side, it's a battle of the big dogs. You've got Alexander Onishuk, could have been number 2 seeded in this tournament just by some percentage points almost, but he's going to have to face off against the 4-time champion Kamsky, who had some strange things to say about not winning the championship this year, feeling like it was time for a new champion, but I doubt it. He's going to be tested today, and we'll see how that matchup goes. Of course, our leader, Alexander Lenderman, today he plays Shankland, but look at the rest of the players he's going to have to face. Kamsky and Onishuk waiting in the wings, and he will have the black pieces. So going up against the middle of the order will be Alexander Lenderman. There we see Onishuk getting his game face on. Today's matchup will be key as the players are ready to go into the stretch run of the U.S. Championships. Back to you, Jen and Yas.
Boy, Jen, I'm thinking that today we've got some mouth-watering matchups, really. In the women's section, actually, the 4 leaders of the women's section all square off against each other. And in the men's section, that big match between Onishuk and Kamsky, that's going to be, I hope that's going to be our game of the day, because those two are, for the last 10 years, have been the centerpiece of American chess on the foundation.
Are his eyes open?
He seems to be just meditating and getting the mood, getting on his game face. He's very stoic during the game. Here he almost seems kind of far too relaxed, though. I don't know.
He seems, oh yeah, I mean, he's
Onishuk, but look at Onishuk, he looks sharp.
He always
his eyes
is so
are blazing.
Sweet in the interviews and in person, but over the board he has some scary looks.
He does. He can be sharp when he looks at you dead in the eye like, what are you doing, young man?
Well, he's a competitor. He came down and said that he thinks the longer the event, the more favored him.
Yes, because like you mentioned, a triathlete in great physical conditioning, and he thinks that as the event, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. He thinks that towards those later rounds, the money rounds, he'll be doing very well. The traditional handshake, as Kamsky starts the clock, and we do have what I had expected, a queen-pawn opening in our featured game. And it looks like a Dutch. I couldn't see the webcam clearly enough.
Position, guys. But one interesting thing is Onishuk hasn't had a great record against Kamsky. Kamsky's comfortably drawn against him quite a lot, and Kamsky's won 2 games, but they were both with the white pieces. So
in their head-to-head matchups?
Exactly. So can Onishuk break through and score his first victory against Kamsky?
Big question indeed. I can tell you that both players have such a solid style. They really have a difficult time creating chances against one another.
That's probably why. You're absolutely right. And I was wrong. The bow remains. It was just a little hidden from my camera.
There you go. And it's
that
white
was there.
because of the background with the white against the wall. That's where the bow kind of got hidden.
And she's playing against Anna Zatansky, so...
Anna, 4-time champion. This is a very, very big test for Ashritha.
Exactly, but we should point out, Ashritha does play in a lot of open tournaments, so she's not like she's totally unused to playing stronger opponents, right?
Without question, but the difference is that it's every single day. If you play in an open tournament, you're going to get some easy pairings, and there are no easy players in this field, and Anna Zatansky is really a big favorite.
Absolutely, a very big favorite, although I think sometimes the ratings could be a little bit misleading just because sometimes these players have trouble catching up their FIDE ratings to their USCF ratings. If you look at the USCF ratings, she's really only, she's like maybe 30 points behind Alyssa, 80 points behind Victoria. Not as dramatic as their FIDE differentials.
Right, and because she's so young, her style isn't set in stone or anything like that. She's developing very, very rapidly. And if you coach youngsters, you can get surprised by how much progress they make so quickly. It's like they kind of accelerate, they lurch forward. So for sure, Ashritha is underrated. And by the time this tournament is completed, I expect her rating will have gone up quite a bit.
Absolutely, and even looking at the ratings, some of her opponents only 50 points ahead of her. So we I think can expect more good things out of her.
Without question. And shall we have a look at our games?
Yeah, let's see what we're getting in the openings. Any surprises today? Another key game, of course, we're always keeping a close eye on our tournament leader, Alexander Landerman, today playing against Sam Shankland.
I don't have any updated moves on my
No green
monitor.
juice. There's no green juice this game. I don't know. I don't like that.
No Soylent, no Soylent Green? That's terrible.
Soylent Green. Wow, that's some reference. You know what that is? That's a superfood. It's going to replace food.
Yes, but you know where they get it? Soylent Green.
No. There's a new company.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's a startup in California.
Really? I didn't know.
And they call it Soylent despite that story.
Oh, okay. All
and the
right.
idea is that it's going to replace regular food and that people can just subscribe to Soylent and then never have to eat. It sounds miserable, doesn't it?
It does.
But
oh, no. Liquid food. No. All right, just a second. Let me refresh my board.
Yeah, refresh your board and let's take a look at that opening in Lenderman Shankland. How's that going? Yesterday we saw that Lenderman played very combative chess despite the fact that he was a point ahead of the field and, half a point last round. And we really like to see that.
Absolutely.
Now, Shankland has won against Lenderman in the past, so that they haven't played that many times. So Shankland defeated Lenderman in Foxwoods a few years ago. And Shankland's usually had the white pieces in their battles. At the championships in 2009 and 2010, Shankland drew with the white pieces. So this is Lenderman's chance to get a crack with white. And at some point, we imagine that green will join the battle.
Exactly. I'm still having a little difficulties on my monitor. Let me just throw it to Maurice if he has some updated moves, as I still don't have updated moves on my monitor.
Well, it looks like we're getting a few and we'll get more.
Well, yes, thanks. Just pulling up this game right here between Onishuk and Kamsky, and we see the super solid Slav on the board, the A6 Slav, then combined with G6. Kamsky has done this in the past. This stuff is so hard to break down. This wall of pawns just keeping the white pieces out. I've actually yet to see someone really take it to Kamsky in this position. He just loves to play super solid, super strong. This is also an indication that he may just be happy to equalize with the black pieces, knowing that he's facing such a formidable opponent as is Alexander Onishuk. And Onishuk, no doubt, has something prepared against this line. because he knows this is what Kamsky plays. So we'll see what happens there. In another key matchup, we have Lindemann, Shankland. They haven't really gone anywhere, as Lindemann has really been focused on this very basic move order, just a Queen's Gambit decline so far, but only a couple of moves in. Lindemann seems very much focused now. And on another board, on a keyboard in this tournament, Abrahamyan versus Crush, we see here that Crush has chosen to play this line. Is it a Kalashnikov, it looks like? This variation is known to be pretty good for white, and Abrahamyan herself loves to play e4 and these kind of double-edged sharp openings. So I would expect a crazy game here, no doubt about it. Now we switch over to the other key matchup on the women's side. Seirawan and Zatonsky both chasing Irina Krush. Seirawan has played this French line, well, Zatonsky has, but this line of the French, much more open piece play, much more free. These kind of lines lead to good positions for white. White doesn't often lose this type of very easy to play position. So Seirawan might be pleased. She's already in a line that's comfortable, that's easy for her to play. And a draw against Zatonsky would be a huge achievement, but I don't think the kid's thinking about a draw right now. She's playing for the win as much as she can. And already in thought, the move bishop to e7 was played. Yaz, you've been in these kind of positions before. Looks pretty good for the white pieces. Some kind of a comfortable situation to be in, not really being tested so much in the crazy lines of the winnower, for example. What are your thoughts?
Well, indeed. This is, of course, the Rubinstein French. It was actually a favorite for a couple of years of Alexander Morozevich. Alexander Morozevich liked playing the variation with bishop e7, bishop takes f6, g takes f6, going for a very imbalanced position with the double pawns, and it led to some really wild affairs. But you're absolutely right, Maurice. Percentage-wise, white does do well in this variation, and it is hard for black to win. Black has to take a lot of risks.
And shall we move to one of our other games? How's the Irina Krush game going? So Irina Krush versus Tatev Abrahamyan, those have played some epic battles in the past.
I
remember actually Tatev defeated Irina once in a wild Sicilian, and I think Irina got her back recently. So we usually see some really exciting games, especially when Tatev's white, because Tatev really just likes to go for it. And obviously that's the right strategy, being a point behind the field. And yeah, every single game that they've played actually has been decisive. Every game, can you believe it?
Wow.
They played 10 games.
Wow.
And Tatev's only won 2, but obviously she's out there trying.
Swinging for the fences, and all of them, all decisive games. That is truly remarkable, by the way. 10 decisive games out of 10.
And do we have another Sicilian?
Yes, it looks like one of these Kalashnikov Sicilians where Irina Krush is holding back, preparing to play the move f7, f5 to attack white in the center as quickly as possible.
Well, this Sicilian has a bit of a different character, and instead of a white slashing and burning, it actually kind of sometimes has the opposite effect, that white is trying to kind of maintain the positional edge and hold back black's activity. So I think this is a wise choice by Irina.
Yes, I would agree with that, and I was thinking that Tatev might have played, instead of the move c2, c4, which is a very positional move, getting into the types of games that you were just describing. I like the knight b1, c3, and jumping to d5 quickly.
Even in those lines, though, it's still more of a strategic battle than the kind of wild, f3, g4, h4, checkmate type of Sicilians. But you know what? You can't always get what you want, and the Kalashnikov and the Sveshnikov don't really allow that type of crazy attacking.
That's true.
But on the other hand, they give positional concessions. So, Maurice, what do you think of the opening battle, Irina Krush and Tatev?
Well, I think that Irina is playing something that she normally simply does not play, and that Tatev has been caught by surprise and is trying to show that she is not so surprised in this situation. I don't recall this variation being a part of Irina Krush's practice. I must say that her trainer, Georgi Kakishvili, he also trains Alexander Lenderman. So at the moment, this coach has both his charges tied for first place, and their preparation has been quite excellent as well. So kudos to him for maybe catching the opponent unawares, picking the right lines for them to play, and preparing them with confidence, because you see that it's really showing in this tournament so far. We go back to the game between Lenderman and Shankland, and we see this variation of the Queen's Gambit decline. Very sharp has already happened with this dynamic play with the pawns. You see the bishop f4 line. In this line, white often castles queenside, or I should say sometimes castles queenside, and the game gets very, very sharp. So expect a heated battle here. I think that Lenderman is going to be well prepared in such a line. And again, we could go back to that big battle between Onishuk and Kamsky, and you see the move a4 has been played in order to create some kind of bind on the queen side. I'm not sure if this is a new move. Looks like a move that's reasonable enough to play, but certainly not the kind of wild slash and burn central formation that you would expect. It's going to be a turgid battle there in the middle of the board. One other game that we should take a look at is this game between Friedel and Gareev. Gareev was doing so well yesterday, and it was a big disaster. He lost his game from what looked like a very promising position against Abrahamyan. He just completely screwed it up and ended up losing an endgame, now taking a step back. So needing to try to get back in the winner's circle, he's played this very funky line of the modern with a6. It's a line I like to play against lower-rated players, but I've never had great respect for the line. But of course, Gareev, he's got some thoughts. He's got to somehow confuse Friedel and see if he can somehow get back again with a win, so that he gets that bitter taste of the loss out of his mouth. In the meantime, Friedel looks very comfortable right now. So interesting openings starting here. I think that a lot of victories, we will be seeing a lot of victories in this round of the championships. Back to you guys.
We're up. We got a game that we're going to be following very closely, Lenderman-Shankland.
Our leader.
Let's see how that's going.
Yeah, our leader in the tournament, Alex Lenderman, playing against Sam Shankland. Sam, as we know, is at 50%. And I had expected more from Sam, and Lenderman is definitely outperforming his wildest expectations. We had a queen pawn opening with d2, d4 by our tournament leader. And Sam, who usually plays a Slav defense, this time instead of playing the c7, c6 Slav, for which he's most well known, has played a Queen's Gambit declined with the move e7, e6. Let's see how the game continued. All along, right, straight down the standard pathways. Bishop f4. That's the second most popular move. The most popular move that's we've been around for hundreds of years is the move bishop g5. So the move bishop f4 that was played, one of the drawbacks of this move is it does allow black an opportunity, an earlier opportunity than he otherwise might have for playing c7, c5, attacking white in the center. Let's see if Sam followed with the early c7, c5. Queen c2, all very standard, and finally he does get in the move c7, c5, rook d1, trade on d4, and Lenderman to think. Lenderman to play. By the way, it goes without saying that throughout the tournament so far, in all of the rounds, Lenderman's opening preparation has simply been outstanding. There's just no other words for it, as he's constantly surprised his opponents so far in this tournament. But the fact that he's just paused right here causes me to think that Sam may have hit his target in surprising Lenderman.
Well, Shankland also a very well prepared opponent as well.
Absolutely.
We have some questions coming in, some comments and questions using the hashtag US Chess Champs. Please hit us up on Twitter.
Okay.
Or you can email us at comments@stlouischessclub.org, and we are going to be giving away some prizes, some chess.com memberships and some chesskid.com memberships as well. And Axel Ammer says, when do you tend to spend the majority of your clock time? How much of it is influenced by your opponent's speed? Well, Yasser actually touched on this yesterday when he talked about sensing the critical moment, how the stronger the player is, the more they realize when it is a critical moment and they need to, really spend their clock time.
Right.
Right? And how much is it influenced by your opponent's speed? Well, for good players, it's only influenced by our opponent's speed in that if our opponent's playing very quickly, we can't think on their time.
Right.
So we usually have to spend even more of our own time as a result. But we're not trying to play a game of ego or chicken and, if you move quickly, I should move quickly because I want to show that I'm as good as you.
Right.
That's
not
a
beginner's trap, actually.
Yes, exactly.
Right. But I was going to say, like yourself, it really depends upon the moment. I'm not influenced so much by my opponent's tempo, but one of the things I have seen here at the St. Louis Chess Club and watching the tournaments that do take place is that a lot of players mismanage their time by actually spending a lot of time on obvious captures.
Right.
And don't do that. Just don't do that. If somebody plays queen takes queen, check, and there's only one move in the position, play it. Right?
Yeah.
Don't think, well, what will happen after I take it, and so on.
Yeah, that is one thing I've noticed about really good players, that I feel that they spend a lot of time, but they don't spend as much time on really obvious moves, whereas I used to get into time pressure all the time, and I think
yes, you did.
One of the reasons was because I would want to spend 20 to 30 seconds on every move.
Right.
Even if it was like an opening move or a capture, and obviously
double
not as extreme
as
queen takes queen, king
right.
takes queen, but kind of on that same level.
Exactly.
Where those little things can eat up at you. Just kind of like if you're, because honestly, time management is like making a budget. Just like if you're making a budget for your finances, it might be the little things like the Starbucks that eats up at you, not the major.
The big ticket items, absolutely. One of the worst, actually, in terms of time management was David Bronstein, challenger to the world champion Michael Bodvinnik. That match ended 12-12. David Bronstein once spent 45 minutes on his opening move as white. And after the game, a journalist asked him, David, what were you thinking about during these first 45 minutes? And David Bronstein answered, I was thinking about what to play. So normally speaking, amongst the professional players, when you go into a game with a clear head as to what you want to play. Don't come to the game and sit down and in panic think, oh, maybe I shouldn't play the French defense, the defense I have just been prepared for the last 30 minutes. Maybe I should play the Ruy Lopez.
So you're saying a U.S. championship or whatever important tournament you prepare for is not the right time to figure out what's better, 1d4 or 1c4?
That is good. That is true. That is for sure.
I don't know if we'll be able to tackle that in 45 minutes anyway.
Right. But
so what else do you got for us? We got other questions?
Well, I was going to say we also have, again, as Maurice described them, two top dogs. Alex Onishuk, Gada Kamsky. Gada Kamsky is playing his favorite Slav defense. They're still in the opening, but essentially what has happened in the Slav defense so far from the starting position, Alex opened up with a queen pawn, d4. This was d5, c4, c6. And you just heard me talking about Sam Shankland. And this move as the Slav defense, one of the most popular moves, defenses, I should say, in the world's elite. Gada has been using it for years as his favored weapon. A7, A6.
And we've discussed this move before. It looks a little bit weird, but trying to possibly play B5, rook A7 sometimes, defends the B5, the B7 pawn, and
as well as just threatening to capture the c4 pawn and keep it.
Right.
So we see the move e2, e3 to defend the pawn on c4 with the bishop. And now g7, g6. This line of play is not the most popular amongst the top players, but Gada has had stellar results with it. Somehow it just matches his style very well. So he likes playing the kingside fianchetto, bishop e2. Both players have now accomplished one of their primary goals in the opening, which is king safety position. Both kings are very safe from the opening. And now A2, A4. Okay, that's a little bit off the beaten path there. More standard, I would think, in this position is the move B2, B3, preparing to do something with the bishop on C1. Instead, we see the move A2, A4, an interesting little wrinkle. Gata matched white with the move A6, A5. So what Gata is trying to say is that I want to post a piece on the B4 square, queen D1 to B3. So the idea behind this early queen move is just to make it that much more difficult for black to develop his light squared bishop by keeping the pawn on B7 under target.
Well, no way Onashuk is going to be out of his preparation. I mean, he knew that Kamsky would probably play this.
Oh, without
it's
question.
This for the Grunfeld.
Yes.
And probably this. So
and probably
he probably
this.
did something like 70-30.
Exactly.
Or, you know, it's funny though, because even if it's only 30% chance that the Grunfeld would show up, he might have spent more time on it just because it's more critical.
Yeah, in a sense, the lines are so sharp, you need to refresh to make sure that your mind is alert. But, whereas this is a slow play kind of game, yeah.
I mean, but not only did he prepare this, he probably prepared it before the tournament so that he could relax and run and swim and whatever he liked to do to keep himself less stressed.
The cross trainer. Rook D1. And now Gata is thinking. So here the point is that black's only liability is his light squared bishop. White has a little preponderance of space advantage thanks to these pawns on D4, C4. But that's okay. All you need is one good square for each of your pieces. And I would anticipate that Gata would play knight B8 to A6 with the idea of putting his knight on B4, which again would rather stymie White's queen. Again, the players are still deep into their preparations. Nothing special happening here. Let's see if we can get some more exciting action in some of the other games.
And we also have some more questions and comments coming in at US Chess Champ. So thanks guys for participating. One question from Just for Chess is if Lenderman achieves success in this tournament and more, will his game with Ramirez in round 3 be revered as much as some of Fischer's? I think that's unlikely. Bobby Fischer?
No, unlikely.
Is absolutely a legendary player who's inspired so many players.
Absolutely.
That being said, if Lenderman has a wild surge and becomes world champion, that's what it would require for his games to be revered. And
without question.
And obviously that is a long road ahead, but
I remember,
never say never.
Exactly. I remember having a conversation many, many years ago with a Soviet champion, a remarkable player, Grandmaster Lev Sakis. And it was still at the time of the Soviet Union. And Lev and I were just having these very nice discussions, and we started talking about the Fischer-Spassky match in 1972. And I was mentioning to Lev how impactful that single event was in my life as a chess player, and eventually brought me a chess career as a professional. And Lev was explaining to me that he was a man from the Soviet Union. He was rooting for Bobby Fischer.
Wow.
He was rooting for Bobby Fischer, and this was such a shock for me because I thought, you know, like everyone would be nationalistic, especially in the Soviet Union, and it wasn't even permitted to even suggest that you might favor the American in the match. And I asked him why, and it was simply that Bobby was a hero for him too.
I mean, it's a great story.
It was just
and I
that
think
simple.
It's important to remember that, because one of the things that being able to travel to all these countries and meet people from different cultures is you get a wider perspective. And
absolutely.
You know, for instance, sometimes talking to the Iranian chess players.
Yes, there you
realize
go.
That they're just as upset, or obviously not just as upset, but more upset about some things that their government might be doing than
you would otherwise thought.
Yeah, you know, you can be surprised that obviously, people rooting for Bobby, it kind of makes sense,
Right,
right? If
exactly.
you think about it more deeply.
Exactly.
Quietly rooting.
Right. And I love the story recently from Aviv Friedman, a famous chess coach here in the United States. He goes to all of these Scholastics World Championships, and he had gone to the United Arab Emirates, but he had an Israeli visa on his passport, and so he was clearly being admitted into the country. He was not concerned per se, but his safety was in question. And then he was walking around with the locals just talking to them about Israeli politics, and he was really pleasantly surprised that actually their views were very similar with the views of the locals. I thought that was a very humorous story, in fact.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's one of the most controversial things that in some of these FIDE tournaments, some countries, they can't be paired against Israel, but usually that's coming from the government, not from the players themselves.
Precisely.
The players would love to play.
Exactly. They like to play. So these are really political things that are keeping the players apart. But
unfortunately, fortunately, it's pretty rare.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, with many of the Cuban players in particular, I like a lot of the Cuban players, and I've had great battles with some of the Cuban grandmasters, and I found them very, very engaging individually. And yet our governments are so opposed to one another. It's like, we can't be friends. Okay, let's be friends anyway.
No direct flight from New York to
Havana.
Not yet.
No.
We have another question, I think, that we're going to try to get up here. Hashtag us at US Chess Champs. And this one is from chess.com. The question is, most girls that I know of are interested in clothing, dolls, etc. But I'm sure that when you were young, chess was big for you. How did chess and the St. Louis Chess Club become such a big part of your life?
Right.
Oh, that's a great question. Well, actually when I was really young, my brother was such a talented and promising player that I actually wasn't involved in chess when he became a master. It took me a little bit longer. So I was about Aswaran's age when I started to get more into it.
Really?
So I think that's good for people to know, because a lot of times they think that if you don't show promise at the very beginning, it's hopeless.
Right.
That's not the case. I didn't show a lot of promise at the beginning, and yet I still was able to get the master rating at 16 after really getting into it, when I started realizing how much fun chess was.
Right.
So that's the thing. You don't want to compare yourself to other people and say, like, I'm not this good, so I won't be able to be a champion. Just get into the game.
Right. Well,
fall in love with it, and then the rest will come. Usually those people who are thinking about results and rewards are not the ones who are succeeding. It's the ones that just love chess.
Right. Well, I'll steal a little bit of your thunder and to inform the questioner that, of course, you're a daddy. Mike, one of the strongest players in Pennsylvania, and Philadelphia champion, strong master. Played chess most of his life, I believe. So you had to have, so chess was always around, even if you weren't interested per se until 12, 13, that you kind of got into it. You were aware that your dad and your brother were playing chess, and you knew what was going on.
That's right, and that does help a lot, and that's why it's nice to have chess in the schools, have the St. Louis Chess Club as a resource, so that if the family doesn't play chess, you can get that chess community elsewhere.
Right.
So, great question, and we've got something from Grandmaster Maurice Ashley.
Indeed, Jen, some interesting developments happening on a few boards that we should take a look at. Let's start here at the top board on the women's side. Abrahamyan has played Crush, as you mentioned, 10 times, all those decisive games. Every time she has had white, it has always been E4, C5. We know Crush plays the Sicilian regularly, but it has never been a Kalashnikov. So this did surprise Abrahamyan, seeing Crush play like this. So let's jump back to this moment when this position appeared on the board, and Abrahamyan had to give a good thing. No doubt she had prepared for Crush's normal lines. Crush has played E6 early, has played A6 early, but never this move E5 with D6. On seeing this, Abrahamyan didn't want to look too surprised. She played C4, something I guess normal for her. And bishop to E7 was played, avoiding bringing the knight out and allowing Sveshnikov lines with bishop to G5. And after this, Bishop to d3, a slightly unusual move here, definitely played mainly because this knight doesn't want to end up on this a3 square after its attack. So this move, knight c3, which is the most popular move, was not played in order to give her knight the chance to go back to this square, which is exactly what happened. Knight went back to c3, and now the move bishop to g5, taking a moment to take advantage of the fact that this bishop is able to trade itself off. This d6 pawn, or the pawn structure, blocks the bishop. So now a possible trade here, which often gets blocked. Knight to d2 is a typical move here, but instead, Abrahamyan put a knight on a3 anyway. You thought she was trying to avoid this formation. She allowed it anyway. Now bishop c1 and rook to c1 has been played. So very new for these players, this particular opening. I'd like to quickly look at this line. It looks as though Seirawan has decided to go for simplification. This is simply not the main way to play. In this moment here, bishop f6 is the most popular move to keep more minor pieces on the board. But the youngster traded off. Knight f6, bishop f6, queen f6, and after knight f3, castles, queen d2, signaling her intention of maybe castling on the queen side. Satoshi responded with b6. And this position is definitely fine for black, looking very equal right now. Those trades don't leave a great impression. So the youngster is going to have to show us what she's got planned in that line. And on another board we have not paid any attention to is this game, Molnar-Robson. I really like what's already starting here. Some serious action. The pawn has already gone to the square e5. This happened just on the previous move. After bishop to e7 was played, this bishop move, Mackenzie decided, let's go. I want to see why you want my pawn on your half of the board, the bishop dropping back. So this knight will end up being rerouted to this other side, but d6 is slightly weak. So this game we want to keep an eye on because these two players are sharp. Molnar, he's all about attacking, and Robson, he's all about tactics. So this should be a very exciting game as well to keep an eye on here at the championships. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Maurice. I was just going to say that another game that's really caught my fancy is the game between Abrahamyan and Ramirez, another heavyweight matchup for this round. And the point there is in the game of Abrahamyan's been playing this opening really slowly with white, which is an indication that, at this point at least, that he's gotten caught in an opening that he really didn't expect. And let's see why he's having such difficulties. So, as we could expect, Var, he loves queen pawn opening, so d4 came out very quickly. d5, c4, and c6, a Slav by Alejandro. He plays a Slav a lot himself.
Well,
so,
the opening of the day, we've got that into crucial matchups.
So nothing surprising here. Knight c3 takes. Now this is already the first surprise for Abrahamyan. Normally speaking, everybody, and I mean everybody in his brotherhood, plays knight f6. This goes back to the 1930s World Championship matches between Max Erva and Alexander Alekhine. When this capture was originally tried, I've had a number of games as white myself, where I've gotten huge opening advantages after the move e2, e4, threatening to play bishop takes c4. It's a long, complicated variation that goes like this. I think this variation was tried by Garry Kasparov and Ivan Sokolov in a very celebrated game that Gary won as white, but it works out to advantages for white. But Abrahamyan did not play this challenging move e2, e4. Instead, he played knight f3. And this opened up a world of possibilities for Ramirez, and I really like what he did. Alejandro said, listen, you're going to give me the pawn on c4. I'm going to keep it. And he played a very savvy little move here, e7, e6. So basically what he's saying is that with this move e6, this bishop on c8, I intend to play b7, b5, and keep my pawn for good. Abrahamyan started thinking, thinking, and he played a2, a4, saying, I don't want you to play b5. But I really like this move now, bishop f8 to b4, because basically with this bishop coming out and pinning this knight on c3, Ramirez is saying, I'm going to play b7, b5, no matter what you do, and I'm going to be a pawn up. You, Var, you got to show your stuff and show compensation for the pawn. Akobian does not like being down material, and so that's why he's been spending so much time on this particular opening. So big developments early in this game. Maurice, you have some insights you'd like to share.
Well, a fun position happening on one other board among two top players. This game between Friedel and Gureyev. Actually, Gureyev is really the higher rated player in this contest, and we talked about him trying to win a game quite soon, and he's played the hippopotamus opening. That's one you rarely see at this level. Let me see if I can get our analysis board right. So let's just go back momentarily. We saw this move knight to c3, and after this, the move a6 followed by bishop e2. This cagey move a6 to stop a piece from going here, but more importantly, to prepare the move b5, which he didn't play. He played knight to d7 after this move, and after castles, e6, avoiding all contact with the pawn at the top, and now the move bishop to g5, and guess what? Knight to e7. Look at these knights. Rarely do you see two knights placed like this. Actually, when you see it, it's in the hippopotamus. That's the time you see it. Now the move queen d2, potentially preparing to put a bishop on the square or just to get the rooks connected. And now h6, another feature of this opening, and the bishop dropping back. And basically what white is saying to black is, now your pawn's on h6. How are you going to castle? Now, I've seen this played before. I've even played it once or twice myself. The move b6 and bishop to b7 usually comes into this opening, making it a true hippopotamus. And the king often plays itself to f8, to g8, to h7 in order to castle. A long way to go, and it looks like it loses a lot of time, but it's not easy for white to break the center open. Any pawn advance, one way will lead to a pawn advance the other way to keep the center closed. So a tricky opening to play, and right now, Gureyev played the move knight to f6. This one, I don't often see this line get played this way, the knight switching places coming over to this square. So what's interesting about this opening is that when you play it, you can prepare it as black. You think you've prepared it, you're somewhat ready, and then the guy plays natural moves, and it's even harder for you to play your position because it's easy for white to make moves, but on black side, the position is so unusual that you really have to have a lot of experience in it to get your bearings. I don't know if Gureyev has prepared it well enough. The grandmaster who knows this opening the best would be Tigger Pearson, I believe. He's actually, this is often called Tigger's or Tiger's opening, if you will, and he definitely plays it with success. He's even written a book on it. This is an interesting battle ahead. We'll see how Josh Friedel handles himself here against the hippopotamus. Back to you guys.
Well, that's funny. We actually have a comment from one of our tweeters. Alexander Stoyanov from Sashos wrote, "Hey guys, do you find the hippo by Gureyev somehow disrespectful?"
Oh, no, not at all. No. The hippopotamus is a rarity, that's for sure. But don't forget, in the World Championship match between Boris Spassky and Tigran Petrosian, the hippopotamus was featured. So, I mean, it definitely has its admirers. The whole idea of the hippopotamus is to get a very flexible defense. You're giving up a lot of space, of course, in the center, but the idea is you're not following the diktats of theory, and a lot of original play can develop. Now, why the hippopotamus could be very popular is if you're playing against a player who's very theoretically booked up and has a great deal of knowledge, encyclopedic knowledge about the openings, you want to get that player out of his comfort zone, out of the openings that he's studied, and get him to play his own original moves. And in this case, Timur, I really actually applaud him for this because Josh is not one of the higher ranked players in the field. Certainly Josh would have come to this event very well prepared, spent months in training, in fact, and so Timur is basically saying, look, I'm going to give you the advantage in the opening, but guess what? You're just going to have to outplay me to keep that advantage. So I think it's a perfectly legitimate choice, especially when white doesn't have moves, openings that could feature f4 or c4. Only e4 and d4, very flexible. And when I was growing up, by the way, the hippopotamus, as well as what we called the rat, was a defense I liked to play very often with black. And I played an early a6 and b5 as well.
Wow, a hippopotamus sounds a lot better than a rat.
Yeah, but the rat is a pretty amazing animal. You know, I mean, it can survive a lot, a rat.
Yeah, one way to look at it. And with that, let's take a quick commercial break.
All right.
We'll be right back with more from the U.S. Championship. Welcome back to the 2014 U.S. Chess Championship. We've got our game, Lenderman, really a key game for the standings. Can Lenderman continue to
impress the field?
That's right. I mean, can he maintain his lead? He's playing against Shankland. And Yasser, you were saying that you really like the way that this opening has turned out for Sam.
Oh yes, definitely, very much so. It feels to me that Alex, who has really relied upon his opening preparation to get an early edge in his games, and he's done so very successfully, has been caught in today's game. I was explaining earlier that this line of play with the bishop coming to f4 allows black an early c7, c5. When Sam played that c7, c5, it seemed to catch Lenderman by surprise, and the move rook takes d4, this just feels wrong. What on earth is the rook doing in the center of the board, vulnerable to e6, e5 types of attacks? And Sam jumped all over that move with the move queen a5, indeed, with ideas like capturing on c4 and once again playing e5. And then Alex just basically lost a tempo with this voluntary retreat, so to speak, rook on d4 to d1, and I'm sitting there saying, my goodness, white's king still in the center, the bishop on f1, he's not ready to jump out of the center anytime soon. I'm thinking that after a move, either rook d8, which is a nice little reasonable move, but even the very aggressive and looks to me a highly desirable move, knight b6 could be played, attacking the pawn on c4. White does not want to capture on d5. Knight takes d5 with an attack against the knight on c3, the bishop on f4. And I'm already thinking that black has cruised past the equality and would actually stand better, slightly better, if this position were to occur on the board. In other words, I think Sam is just as pleased can be with the outcome of this opening.
Wow, look at his posture.
He does have that feeling of like a bird of prey, right? He's ready to jump. Pounce, I mean. So
we better go get some of that green juice.
You better fill up, right. So
Yeah,
again, a very nice opening choice by Sam. He's being rewarded today. Another game that actually, it's from the women's event. It's the game between Victoria Ni and Nemkova. That also got my attention because when I was preparing for my match that was played here in St. Louis, a match, funnily enough, I kind of dreamt about when I was young, playing Anatoly Karpov, a match, but it was supposed to be for the World Championship. That just didn't occur. I had prepared this pawn sacrifice, the very pawn sacrifice that Victoria is playing today. I had prepared for Anatoly, and essentially we'll go back to the start of the position for a second, and the players played all of these standard moves that came from what we call a Queen's Indian defense, and this is one of the most popular, one of the positions that Anatoly Karpov defended his whole career. And I like this idea of d4, d5. This was introduced by Grandmaster Lev Polygaevsky. This pawn sacrifice. White advances right into the teeth of black's defenders. Bishop on b7, pawn on e6, knight on f6, all defending the d5 square. And white plays d4, d5 anyway. Captures on d5. Knight h4. This was really the gem behind Lev's pawn sacrifice approach. The bishop on g2 is opened up that diagonal, pinning the pawn on d5 and preparing the knight jump, knight f5. You get some fantastically complex battles out of this pawn sacrifice. So Victoria really
I feel like Yuri played this against me once.
Did he really? Victoria's husband, Yuri Shulman?
Like, or maybe I saw a game by him. It looks really familiar from Yuri Shulman.
He played it against me too.
Okay, yeah.
The pawn sacrifice. He played it against me in the U.S. Championship as well.
And Yuri's great at this kind of opening.
Exactly. So something Victoria may have been
Shout out to Yuri, actually. We kind of miss him here. He's had
time.
fantastic performances in the U.S. Championship.
Big time, big time. Right now he's taking care of the little one, Gabe.
That's right. And also just like with a 12-player field and so many strong players kind of switching federations, it's just harder and harder to get into the championship. But you never would have thought it would be hard for somebody who was, you know, second place 2 years in a row.
Absolutely. And playing on the U.S. Olympic teams, world teams,
exactly.
My goodness, yeah.
We kind of like outperformed his rating a lot of times in the championship. There's some people who are just like that. That just kind of like Onishuk and Akobian are a little bit the opposite. Like, it's not that they underperform, but they're usually not in contention, even though their ratings would suggest that eventually they would be. Right.
They play at some very solid level where other players are spiking at the big moments.
That's right. We've got more from Maurice.
I just wanted to focus on the top board on the women's side. Grandmaster Irina Krush playing against a favorite customer almost of hers, Tatev Abrahamyan, who is trying for a breakthrough against Irina. Of course, Tatev has defeated her before, but the score is kind of lopsided between the two of them. So she's trying to make sure she does not get surprised. Irina played this funky variation. Well, it's a known variation, but she's just simply never played it against Tatev before. And now she's plunked her knight in on the d4 square. She took some time to get here. It's one of those minuses of playing an opening you've never played before is when the lines start to deviate from what you prepared. Now you have to go on your own, but your experience is not there to help you because you've never played the opening before. So Tatev no doubt has seen, that is Abrahamyan, has no doubt seen this as white before, this kind of setup before. But Krush has to be on her own now. So she's put her knight on the d4 square, which Houdini is saying is just fine. I want to bring up the form from yesterday that Irina Krush showed in her game against Kamila Baginskaite. If you haven't seen it, it's just a wonderful miniature to take a look at. Let's examine it here. In this position, Krush had white, and she proceeded to play some beautiful moves. She started by trading on e4, and now this pawn was under attack from the rook and queen, so pawn takes was forced. And instead of moving the knight, she started with this very nice move, rook to d5, testing the queen as to where it would go. It could not go on this side. It also could not play the move queen to e7 because the rook would come down, again ignoring this knight, and attack both the queen and the bishop. So instead, she was forced to put her queen on the other side of the board, queen to c8, which now put four black pieces on this queen side. Krush was quick to take advantage of that with the move knight to g5, and now she was threatening the very powerful queen h5 with a vicious mating attack afoot. The best move was probably h6 at this moment, willingly giving away a pawn in the main line. I'll show it to you. h6, what could have been played, and after queen to h5, taking this piece, rook takes, so much pressure on this pawn that you'd have to give the piece back in this line, a line that you showed yesterday, Yasser. After these moves, white is up a pawn, but has to prove herself after this queen to c2 move, because black could get some counterplay and trying to fight out a sturdy defense. Instead of doing that after knight g5, Baginskaite played something miserable, the move f6. This one made Irina Krush's eyes go wide open, and she quickly played the move rook to d7, knowing that her knight was completely immune. If pawn takes knight, then queen to d5, check, and the king, wherever it goes, is going to get checkmated by a bishop, a vicious finish. So instead of that after rook to d7, realizing that she couldn't touch the knight, she tried to bring her own knight over to this side, but it did not help because of this beautiful queen to h7, queen to h5 move, threatening h7 and also f7, leaving a rook hanging. The rook was captured, queen to f7 check, king to h8, and then the beautiful bishop takes on f6, and the position had exploded around black's king. No defense, no satisfying defense against the mate on g7. Obviously, you can't capture because of queen takes h7 mate. Also, rook to g8 is not playable because of the simple queen back to h5 with lots of mate threats. One, queen h7, the second, knight to f6, knight to f7, and if h6 in this position, queen takes is mate. Just a vicious, vicious finish on Irina Krush's part. She's showing tremendous form in this event, which is why she's a 5-time champion for one thing, but looking every bit of a champion. Imagine 6-time champion. Wow. Yaz, I know you're a 4-time champion. That's pretty amazing.
A great accomplishment if she were to do it. There's still a lot of play in the tournament, and that key game coming up between Irina and Anna as well. I've been keeping my eye on the game of our leader, Alex Lenderman, against Sam Shankland, and pretty much as expected, Sam did play this move knight d7 b6, which I thought he would, trying to force white to resolve the tension in the center. Lenderman was forced to play the move knight f3 to d2, keeping his pawn on c4 protected, and now Sam is seizing the initiative with the move bishop e7 b4, putting pressure on the e1 to a5 diagonal and possibly threatening to simply capture this pawn on c3. One of the intriguing things about this move is, as white, you may get the wrong impression that with the move knight on d2 to b3, that you're winning black's queen. There are lots of lines where queen takes a2 is possible because this knight on c3 is in an absolute pin. But when you attack the queen, strangely enough, you could actually force it even to a more effective square, for example, even like the a4 square here. So basically, it's a bit of a fight for a tempo. If white plays a2, a3, we'll see a big liquidation on the c3 square, and I'm sure Sam will be satisfied with the outcome of this opening. And if white plays the move, just a second, pardon me, if white plays the move bishop e2, Then the fight for the tempo has been won by black, and I reckon that after captures, knight takes, bishop takes, b7, b6, once again black has a very comfortable position out of the opening. So still, I think the pressure is on Lenderman in this particular game. In our other key marquee matchup on board 2 between our heavyweights Alexander Onyshuk and Gade Kamsky, so far nothing's been traded. The position is what we would call a closed position. All 16 pawns are on the board, and the players seem to simply have been rearranging their pieces through the opening move. So still everything to play for in this key match. White's a little bit better thanks to, once again, his advantage in space. A little bit to my surprise, this knight stayed on d7 and it didn't go to the square b4. So I'm going to give white a little edge, but black's position is ultra solid. And once again, Gade Kamsky plays these positions better than anybody in the world. He just loves the black side of these closed positions where it's strategical play that decides, not tactics, not combinations, just good, solid chess.
And do you think white has a normal opening advantage here?
Yes, but nothing beyond that. The problem is where exactly should you play? One of the ideas behind this queen having gone cleverly to b8 is to support the bishop. So, for example, let me just go back one move. Alex played h2, h3, making luft for his king. Protecting the square g4. Had Alex gone immediately for the move e3, e4, breaking in the center, it's strange that white breaks in the center, but guess what? It's black's pieces that come alive, not white's. After all of those trades, the move c6, c5, and then suddenly you just take a look at the position for a moment, and this sleeping bishop that was dormant, this sleeping bishop are now on two really nice sweeping diagonals, and it's not easy for white. If white mistimes, I meant to say his break e3, e4, black can get a very good game quite quickly with this counter c6, c5. So Alex is under, he has to find a deep plan to make such a break of e3, e4 effective.
Because he's so hard to beat, isn't he?
Yeah, because if you mistime it, the advantage can just swing that quickly. So still a stodgy position, trench warfare going on in our game 2 battle. Let me just...
And we're going to take a quick break, and we have, as usual, one of our Bobby Fischer positions.
Ah, puzzle of the day. Let's see what it is.
Actually, we're going to have multiple puzzles today, so
stay
tuned, and you're going to hopefully learn a lot.
Can I win a membership?
Sure.
Okay, great.
That's not fair to the audience.
Oh, come on.
And we are back at the 2014 U.S. Chess Championship and U.S. Women's. And sorry to everybody at home who wasn't able to access us in the last half hour or so.
We've had some difficulties, haven't we?
Yeah, a little bit of a pawn storm, or I think actually so many people all over the world logging in.
That could be it.
Crashing. No, we thank you, those of you for staying with us, and we're excited about the day. And keep questions and comments coming. U.S. Chess Champs. Comments at stlouischessclub.org.
Well, today we've had some major matchups in the women's championship. The four leaders are all playing against one another. In the men's championships, again, Lenderman, Shankland, Kamsky, Onishuk, big games. But I'm actually intrigued by the game between Josh Friedel and Timur Gariev. Yes. Only because Timur has played this very rare defense, the hippopotamus, and I'm just mystified by Black's last move. Let me just go back to this moment. B2, B4 is a common move in this type of position as White denies Black any opportunity to play B5, B4, chasing the knight, attacking the pawn on E4. So B4, everything's fine with that move. But then this very bizarre bishop B7 to C6. I haven't seen that move. I have a massive tournament experience, and I actually played this variation with Black. I've never played bishop C6 in this move. Either this was a very deep move, or Timur is simply barking up the wrong tree with this move. A much more standard move for Black. Maurice mentioned the castling by hand, king F8 to G8 to H7 to protect this H6 pawn. Another common idea for Black in this specific position is to play G6, G5. Very ambitious move, blunting the battery against the H6 pawn. Black prepares to castle, as well as to play moves like knight E7 to G6. So this move, bishop C6, which was played in the game, is just, I've been troubled by it. Don't quite follow it. I'm sure Josh didn't get the idea either. He just played rook Fe1 and said, please show me what you're doing, and please explain to our audience what your bishop is doing on C6 while you're trying to figure out a plan. Yeah,
let's try to figure it out. What could it be? It's so strange.
Well, the only thing I can imagine is if you go back to this position, Timur may have been concerned about White playing A2, A4. Again, I see the move B2, B4 as being just a defensive move to stop Black from playing B4. So the move bishop C6 may be directed that, okay, you can't play A4 because of captures. You can't capture because, once again, this pawn on E4 would be hanging in that case. So if White isn't playing for A4, which I don't think White is, by the way, and instead White just brings everything to the center, rook F1 to E1, rook on A1 to D1, White has a very harmonious position, and Black still has to solve the question of what he's doing with his king.
That's right. I mean, that's a beautiful center. Usually we have to pay a little bit more to get a center like that.
Right.
And that's what happens when you play a kind of offbeat opening, unorthodox, like the hippopotamus with that.
Well, you're taking risks, clearly. Yeah.
So a lot of children, they like to play openings based on the opening name.
Right.
So the hippopotamus, the dragon, the cooler sounding the name, the more likely they are to play it. But
so the rat doesn't qualify in that case, does it?
I don't know. The rat is kind of a cool sounding name. That sounds like just dirty, right?
The rat.
Dirty usually is a good thing in poker, at least. I think in chess too. It means you're playing kind of like sneaky moves.
Right. Let's just take a quick look at the game between our leader, Alex Lenderman. He's up against Sam Shankland. I've been saying that Alex
how Shankland
handled the opening very well in my pardon me. Shankland has handled the opening very well in my opinion, and Alex has been living off of his spoils that he's been getting from his opening preparation. He has not done well today, in my opinion. Let's just go back when we had left the position. It was back at these parts. Knight b6, knight d2, bishop b4 came, a3. And I had mentioned that after all of these trades, bishop d7, we got a position like this now. Takes, pawn takes, and white has a problem. How is he going to protect his pawn on c3? He can't simply bring his bishop back to b4 protecting the pawn, because that will simply run into the obvious a5 chasing away the bishop. After a move like rook c1, defending the pawn, well, black is quick to pounce with rook c6, gaining a tempo against the bishop on d6, followed by the immediate rook on a8 to c8, doubling up on the d file against this weakness on c3. And again, black has seized the initiative, and I prefer his game.
That's
and this
right. I mean, it's so much
all came out of the opening.
to attack that pawn on c3 than it is to attack the pawn on d5, right?
Exactly.
So the weaknesses here is just more juicy for black, really.
Really telling
now,
in his favor.
And how do you think, concretely, how do you think white's going to deal with this?
It's not going to be easy. And I'm not suggesting that this is the way that Lenderman will want to play the position. Lenderman may have to jettison a pawn, because if he starts going backwards in a really gross way and plays a move like knight b1, bringing his knight back to the first rank, I mean, he's just inviting black to bring his knight to c5, to e4, possibly even following up with knight c4.
Oh my gosh. Every single one of black's pieces looks better than every single one of white's.
And
that's always a bad sign.
And why is that a big surprise? Look at all of white's pieces still in their barracks.
Another Fisher random game.
Yeah, this is not what you would expect to see from a player who's not only leading the tournament, but having a tournament performance rating way up there in the stratospheres of the 2800 classes. So a bad outing, almost from just a bad opening.
Did you see him there? He actually just went like that, like a.
Oh, like he caught the point. Oh,
like
yes.
he noticed something. Yeah.
He noticed something.
Definitely not happy. Sometimes players become a little bit more animated when they're in trouble.
Well, this is the first
they can't
time.
control themselves.
True, and this is the first time that Alex Lenderman has been in real pressure in this championships, and it will be interesting to see how he handles that pressure, because if Sam could rope him back into the pack, look at that chasing pack. Onishuk, Kamsky, Gardiev, Akobian, all standing at +1, and I'm sure they're rooting for Shankland to do very well in this game. Shall we see also the heavyweight matchup? Last time we looked, literally nothing had been traded. In this case, a single exchange has been made. The bishops have been traded. We go back a little ways to about these parts, and I was explaining why the early e3, e4 could rebound against white, and that is what white wants to do, is to advance in the center. Just a second, after we get some moves. That's an interesting, look at, even though he's in a cramped position, look at how Gata is maneuvering. Rook on a8 to a7, remarkable little rook lift there, followed by, after bishop d3, again, white is clearly aiming for e3, e4, bishop back to a8, so that this rook can eventually come on over into the center of the board. Rook e1, again, great patience
It looks
by...
like he's chilling, too. He's just like, I'm relaxed.
Well, he really does want to get in this move e3, e4, and he wants to make sure his pieces are ideally placed.
Oh, I mean, Kamsky looks relaxed.
Oh, in the game, bishop f8. Okay, so this bishop on a3, Gata felt was doing more work than the bishop on f8, so trading off one of his opponent's effective pieces. Knight d2, further preparation. I mean, how many times is he going to reinforce the advance e3, e4?
Before he actually plays it?
Exactly.
Good question, and I can tell Maurice actually this is his favorite type of position.
Oh, sure.
Thrills and chills. Maurice, what do you got for us?
Yeah, this is when I get the pillow and start playing Scrabble. I mean, this one locked, deadlocked. This is Kamsky's favorite kind of position when he's defending because he knows it's very hard to pierce his formation. So I don't expect anything from Onyszczuk in this game. It looks like he's happy to just play real solid, typical of his style, but so minimalist that it looks like it's not going to do anything to Kamsky, who yesterday surprisingly said that it looks like we're going to have a new champion this year. That was a statement that took all of us by shock. I mean, we said, what? How can the champion be saying that? And especially after he played a very nice game against Sergei Ehrenberg in round 4 of the championship. Just wanted to go back to that position to show to fans who haven't seen it. Here, Kamsky played the very nice move, rook to d6, plunking his rook down on a super square. This is usually bad news for the defender. When you see a rook land in the middle of your heart like that and you can't capture it, well, he could have taken it. He chose not to because after takes his pawn sacrifice, queen to f6 just ties everybody up. This knight can't move. These pawns are under attack. A tremendous position for white. So here, Ehrenberg, after rook to d6, decided to play h5. This is just tossing pawns because it's Kamsky's position for choice here. He moved his rook over to d1, and now the rook was solidly cemented on that square. And after f4, he still didn't worry about that. He played the move queen to c4, preparing a very nice sacrifice. In case of pawn takes pawn, he would have won a piece with this queen take on this square, and now queen takes queen is not playable because of rook takes rook, rook takes, and then just simply trading down and ending up a piece ahead, of course, this extra knight. So in this position, after queen to c4, the king moved over to c8, and then Kamsky played g takes, and then just kept the power moves. Look at those pieces, magnificently centralized in the heart of Black's position. Black played this move, a blunder, not realizing the next move was coming. It didn't matter much anyway. Rook takes c5. Of course, you can't take because you just drop your queen. So after rook takes c5, he had to go back, grovel back into the corner, and then the other rook posted in the heart on the 7th rank of the position, hitting the queen. Knight takes rook is, of course, unplayable because of queen takes queen, and there's just brutal threats of checkmate on this line about to appear. The knight's hanging. I mean, any normal move could lead to just total pain after a move like queen to d5 or other ideas in the position. So Black decided right here to call it quits. Kamsky showing his power chess. This is certainly his kind of chess position. He loves to play chess in this way. And sometimes, though, often you'll see him play with Black very solidly, very cagey, just, you know, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to let you try to do something so I can defend well. And it looks like Onyszczuk is really up against it, but he knows what kind of monster chess this guy can play. So you can understand why you see him being really cautious, maybe too much of an abundance of caution, respecting this 4-time champion for the tremendous fighter that he is. Back to you guys.
Yeah, I don't really blame either of the players. I think it's an unfortunate clash of styles.
Yes.
Or rather than clash of styles, match of styles. Like too matchy-matchy, right?
Exactly, exactly. That was one of the reasons why I thought the matches, the 5 World Championship matches between Karpov and Kasparov was so engaging, because Karpov had this Iceman-like style, this wonderful technical precision, versus the fiery and sacrificial Garry Kasparov tactics galore. And so the clash of their styles was fantastic.
And by contrast, we see the Irina Krush Tatev Abrahamyan 10 decisive games, something about their styles, always creating interesting chess and very double-edged positions as well.
Bringing out either the best or the worst in both players, that their matchups. Like I don't think I've ever had an opponent where all the games between us were decisive. I had a lot of decisive games, won some, lost some, with Larry Christensen, but we also had a number of draws as well in our head-to-head.
Well, beautiful red and purple combination.
Right.
I love that.
The fashion statement.
We need to borrow that idea. Now,
you had a good quote for us?
Yeah, I wanted us to, while I pull that quote up, I wanted us to go back to the Grayev game.
All right.
And so Grayev, just a point behind, you know, he had a very disappointing loss yesterday, but he's the kind of guy who seems like he can bounce back quick.
Yes, yes.
And today he chose an unusual opening today. He played the hippopotamus, but as you pointed out, it's been played in World Championship matches. And also, the Grandmaster from Sweden, Tiger Hillar Persson, has written a book about it.
Tiger.
So a tiger playing an animal chess opening kind of makes sense, right?
Right.
And what he said is, the hippo lies low in the water. It looks almost ridiculously passive. And many theoreticians consider the hippo to be a peaceful, almost meek animal. But nothing could be further from the truth. On closer scrutiny, the animal, the position, and the statistics look almost entirely different. The hippo is a fierce animal, ready to crush anyone who gets too close.
Ooh, nice. And by the way, in Africa, the hippo is one of the animals that kills more human beings than lions.
I think that must have been a reference to that.
Yeah, there you go. And by the way, since you had mentioned the Timur Gariev game, and I did bring it up on our screen, Timur played this very mystifying move, bishop c6. Normally it's like the mysterious rook move or the wrong rook move going to the wrong rook going to the right square type of thing. And after queen d7, Josh was very happy to just play straight through the center. If you look at the position from White's point of view, all of White's pieces are ideally placed, if you will, in the center. And then suddenly you're ready for this move, bishop c6 to b7. It's sort of like Timur is saying, I really don't know what I should be doing. And he just moved his bishop back and forth. Because you can just see that black has lost 2 tempi, essentially for nothing, that was why what Maurice was saying, and this whole idea of castling by hand, even though it's a maneuver that's going to cost 3 tempi, because the position is so closed, black can get away with that maneuver. But moving your bishop back and forth without encouraging some very snazzy pawn sacrifices, Timur's playing with fire.
Well, I have looked it up, and the hippopotamus is the 5th most deadly animal.
There you go.
And it's just ahead of the scorpions. I mean, just behind scorpions. Scorpions are slightly more deadly.
Okay.
And snakes, so you wouldn't be surprised by that.
Right.
So the hippopotamus, but actually there's a massive gap. It's kind of like Nakamura and the rest of the championship field.
Okay.
The snake is really, really dangerous.
Oh, yes.
And then there's a big gap between the hippo and the scorpion. So survival skills for you guys out there.
Okay.
If you have a choice.
Avoid snakes, avoid scorpions, and stay away from hippos.
Exactly.
Right. I once got chased by a hippo, actually.
Oh my God, thank God you're still with us.
Yeah. Well, I was in a car. So it was a very good thing. It was a Jeep, pardon me. But it was a very good thing I was in the Jeep.
Car, okay.
Yeah, I was on a safari. And the hippo, I didn't realize that there was a calf. And the Jeep got too close to the calf, and Mama came charging. Ooh, it was very dangerous.
Well, you know the number one now is people. People
Versus people, okay.
So let's take a look at Irina Abrahamyan. We just made a remark about their styles. We didn't actually get a chance to look at the game. Last time we checked, it was a Kalashnikov.
Yes.
As Maurice earlier pointed out, Crush always trying to seize the initiative against Tatev. Abrahamyan plays a Sicilian. Why not? She's had 8 decisive wins against Tatev, right? So 10 decisive games, and she's usually on top.
Exactly.
But I will tell you that the ones that Tatev won have been memorable.
Yeah.
She won a really sweet Sicilian, but that was a more traditional Sicilian, you know, opposite side castling, just kind of really Tatev's cup of tea.
Oh, wow. Okay, very nice.
You can imagine that with that hair that she likes to attack, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But sometimes looks are deceiving. Actually, my father, one of the more you know, sedate players, you can't always tell, and yet he was running Ironman, so he looked like an athletic player who was about to try to bash her head in, but instead, slow style, English.
Positional. He liked to take over the squares. He liked
and then
superior
Ray,
endings.
we mentioned, Ray Robson, looks, you know, very kind of mild-mannered. I was trying not to say meek because I feel like that's like slightly negative.
Hey, that's what they used to say about Superman, or Clark Kent. He was meek, mild-mannered Clark Kent.
And here we got the game now, so.
Right. So
what do you think? We mentioned earlier that usually White has a positional edge here, and it's Black who ends up getting the activity if she can find a way to play f5 at the right moment.
Right. Let's just go back a few moves because we came out of the opening and it was this intriguing idea, bishop g5 early, to get rid of this dark square bishop by Irina. She has pawns on d6 and e5. So from a strategic point of view, it made sense for her to try to trade dark square bishops. And after a couple of standard moves, this knight went to the center, white's knight went into the center, knight d5, castles, king h1. I don't like that move. Bishop d7, queen d2, b5. And we're up to date on the board. And actually, I still think that white has a slight pull here. I wouldn't give her too much of an edge. I would want to get rid of this knight on d4, so the move knight a3 to c2 I would find attractive. And I was just thinking about what would happen in this exact moment if white decided to try to trade all the knights off the board. If black were to cooperate, well, one of the things that white would be very happy about is this rook being on the open c file. It's, oops, that my arrow is terrible, easy to double on the c file for white, giving her an advantage. So I still like Tatyev's position. I'm not so sure about that king h1 move. Just trade all the knights and go into a sedate positional game. Not her forte, because like you say, she likes to attack. But
she's also getting stronger, so becoming more of a universal player. Now she has all of her IM norms. I think, and she's actually been very vocal about, in some of our interviews with the past, that she's more interested in the IM and GM title than the WGM title. So I'm sure she'll be really happy when that officially changes. I think she's got the norms. Maybe, I believe she even went over the ratings, so probably just waiting for FIDE to recognize it.
To confirm her
International Master title.
Nice.
Which is just a tad bit harder to get than the WGM. Usually it requires a half a point more in a tournament performance. So a lot of times somebody will score a WGM norm and an IM norm.
Right.
So it's kind of typical that somebody will have both titles, but it took her an extra year or so to get the full IM title.
Got it. Got it.
And how about we check on our 13-year-old? And while we bring that up, our Shahade Seirawan, who's been shocking us with her inspired play, I will point out we got a couple of good comments from Antonio Fidesz Ander, who said that the mosquito is the most deadly animal by far. Good point.
Malaria.
Yes. Luckily, there is no mosquito opening in chess. And he also made another comment earlier. He asked us if Blitz games are good for studying openings, any advice about how? And he's from Ponteria, Spain. Wow, I don't know where that is, but it sounds nice somehow. I'm imagining some beautiful beach resort. I'll look it up later. And I actually believe that Blitz games are excellent for studying openings, and I hope my student, who's the founder here at the Chess Club, Rex Sinkfield, is listening, because I'm constantly nagging him to play more Blitz, just so that he can kind of Blitz or 15-minute. I even prefer 15-minute, but sometimes it's harder to get those games, just so that you can kind of test yourself. What do you really remember?
Right.
Because if you're just kind of like inputting things into ChessBase and looking for a book, it's like you might think you remember it because it's right there in front of you, but do you really remember it when the clock is ticking and the pressure's on?
Right. And
then you get that experience of maybe losing in a certain line, and it stays with you, you remember it, and you know what you need to fix. So I absolutely believe that Blitz games and rapid games are very good for your openings. And we've got something from Maurice.
Thanks, Jen. A very important development with our leader. He is now down a pawn. Not looking good for him. He decided, Yaz, that it was much better to not defend the position, not just sit there and suffer, but rather just ditch the pawn and try to defend that way, down a pawn. So in this position, after black played e takes d5, white didn't try to play rook c1 and try to hold a pawn that couldn't be held anyway, or you'd have to go through all sorts of contortions, bringing a knight back to b1 in order to hold on to it. Lindemann said, forget the pawn. I'm just going to try to harmonize my pieces. He played knight over first. The move rook to c6 was played, bishop to e7, and now the grab of the pawn. And now he dropped back with bishop to b4, and now rook back to c7. So at the moment, white is just down a clean pawn. Just count them. 6-5, that's it. He does have the 2 bishops. This bishop may potentially be a strong piece, but a pawn's a pawn after all. So Lindemann has to be terrified of this position right now. He's going to have to show some skills defending that one. We did see the maneuver in the Friedel-Gareev game that we talked about. The hippopotamus is typical. The king starting to march over to this side of the board. It should be noted, however, when the king gets on h7, it will be having to eyeball this bishop on d3. So strange things could happen along that diagonal. Black has to be really careful here. White often likes to somehow get this pawn up to h4 and h5. At the moment, though, he would need a knight to be on this side of the board to pull that off properly. Not so easy to get here because this knight is sturdy, grabbing that square. Another game of interest is the game with Iswaran and Zatonsky. Iswaran played a really tepid opening to get to this point, and now it's up to Zatonsky to try to figure out what to do. But she played this move, knight takes on e5 after this position. The youngster has been defending quite well up to this point, and now Iswaran is offering her a queen trade, essentially saying, you can't really get into my position. The trick being this: if queen takes queen, pawn takes, and then rook to d5, trying to win that pawn, she has to be careful because a move like c4, and if you take the pawn, then suddenly rook to d1, and oops, you're losing, flat, cold. A check's coming and you can't do anything about it. Well, it was a mate threat, but if you deal with it, then you're getting mated. So not so easy to take advantage of this position right now for Black. So it looks like the youngster might have solved most of her problems and may be on her way to equalizing. Drawing someone like a 4-time champion in Zatonsky would be an amazing feat for Iswaran. She'd be happy to walk out of here very much standing proud. And I know her parents would be thinking, yeah, if you're drawing them now, imagine what you'll be doing in a couple of years. So a good situation for her. The pressure's on Zatonsky, however, to see if she can make something of this position with the black pieces. Back to you guys.
Okay.
You know, earlier in the broadcast, we had somebody write in about getting more girls into chess. And, you know, I was lucky enough that a couple years ago, I actually gave simultaneous at the North Cal House of Chess, which is where Iswaran, the sisters, you know, learned and became better in the beginning.
San Jose?
Yeah, outside San Francisco.
Outside Frisco, sorry.
I'm not sure the exact city, Fremont, I believe.
Okay.
And that was a opening for my book, Play Like a Girl. So I gave a little simul, and her little sister is also very strong. I heard she's going to be visiting. So it's great to see, you know, these young girls kind of inspired at an early age. I think a lot of young girls watching this broadcast will look at her, and after they listen to us for 5 hours, they're going to study more chess.